one question was posed about money and happiness, and I thought that was an interesting one, something that we hear obviously a lot about or think about. And there's research on money and happiness, but it's such a pervasive part of our culture and understanding of what we should want in this world that I think it's hard for people to understand. Maybe it's not exactly what we think it is, or shouldn't be as important as we think it is. So there is a lot of research, and you probably have heard of it or seen it, where when we look at money and happiness, up to a certain amount, and that can of course depend on where you are living, and the cost of living, and the cost of life, and all that. But once you get to a certain amount, a moderate amount of wealth where you are taken care of, we don't see any significant changes in your happiness once you have more money. And I think when people hear this, it's very hard for them to comprehend that, because we assume that more money means more happiness. And so many of us are striving towards, well, if I just have more money, I will be happy. So when we hear this research, we might believe it to some degree, but I don't think most people really do believe that, as far as how they live their lives, thinking that if they make more money, they're going to be happier. But the research makes this very clear. Actually, what's going to make you happier long term is the quality of the relationships that you have, how loved and supported and close you feel. Not necessarily means actually lots of people, but it means having close relationships. That's a better predictor of your lifetime happiness than the money that you have. And so money is this very interesting social construct. And so we were talking about race earlier in the show, which is a social construct in the sense that biologically, to really define race, it's very complicated, and we really can't do that. And actually, humans across the globe are more similar than even chimpanzees in Western Africa and Central Africa, which I thought was quite fascinating. I saw that in the book by Augustine Fuentes, Why We Believe. So humans, we might think we look so different, or people might make that assumption, but really we're actually genetically much more similar than we realize. Even chimpanzees in the same continent are more different than we are as humans across the globe, which is quite actually fascinating. But race is a social construct, but it doesn't mean that the consequences of it are not real. Now that we have made it this social construct, it's continuing to impact people in so many ways. And so money is also a social construct in the sense that it doesn't really exist in some kind of way, but we have made it important and the most important part of life in a lot of ways. So it's something that we have created. And actually, when we look at it, the social construct, these new technologies like cryptocurrency, NFTs, I don't really know almost anything about that, but there's new forms of currency that are developed. And it's interesting because I think for some people like me, even who doesn't know much about it, but others will think, well, this is like fake money in a way. But really, how real is money? It's very much a social construct that we've made so real. But I think it's important to look at this idea of how money and having more of it is always seen as a good thing. And even I think the field of economics, my brother's a member of that field, and I think he's actually very knowledgeable and more knowledgeable about these issues I'll talk about. But this field of economics, and sometimes when you look at how they've researched some things and saying, are humans being rational or irrational, usually, or one of the factors involved is, if they could do something to have more money, then that's rational. If you do something and end up with less money, it's irrational. And it's almost just, that's it. It's almost that cut and dried. And I am simplifying it, but at times that's how things are looked at, which points to this idea that having money and more money is always good. And if you can have more of it and you didn't get more of it, you're being stupid and illogical and irrational. Even though the research tells us that once you have a certain amount, it's not going to make you happier. And even though when we're making decisions, so many other factors are important and might be more important, but it gives us this idea that always to have more money is a good thing, and you should always do that no matter what, or you're being irrational and stupid. And I think that itself is a stupid idea and irrational. And when we look at the research that shows that you're not going to be happier by having more money, especially up to a certain point or after a certain point. And I think what this sets up is many things. One of the things that money and the ways we look at success, which is tied into that in the sense that success meaning that people know you and you make a lot of money and you're famous. One of the problems is, one, most people don't achieve that. And so because of that, and because this has become the ideal, they feel like a failure. Oh, I'm not that rich. And especially now with social media, you can just see so many people who are wealthy and flaunting that wealth and, you know, flexing with how much they have and what their life is like. And this is my car, and this is my house, and this is my jewelry. And so most people are looking at like, oh, I can never have those things. That guy or that girl, they're winning at life and I'm a loser. And so we feel like we're failing if we don't meet that standard, which is the reality for most people. Most people can't be extremely wealthy. I mean, or by definition, most people can't be in the 1%. Only 1% or the top 1% can be in that by definition. So 99% of people won't be there. And so those people are all going to feel like losers, or let's say maybe the bottom, whatever percent you want to call it, will feel that way. And then the other problem is people that achieve it, they're going to find that they're not happier because of it. And that can make them feel in some ways even worse, because if I have everything I'm supposed to want, but I'm still unhappy, then I must be really messed up, or something must be really wrong with me. If I've gotten everything and I'm still unhappy, I'm defective. And you hear this from actually many celebrities and people that get very famous and wealthy. They wanted to be famous, they wanted to make it, and then they do, and now they're still miserable. Actually, I'm remembering Trent Reznor, I think, from 9 Inch Nails, and he was sharing how he was very depressed and all that, and then he got famous, and in some ways he might have gotten more depressed, or at least it didn't make him happy, as you might think that it would. But to many of us from the outside looking in, we think, oh, he's got it all now, rich and famous. That's what we're all supposed to strive towards. But when you get it and you realize you're unhappy, that makes you feel even worse in some ways. Now, another issue when we look at this idea that having more money is always good, I saw some quote, or it was kind of like a meme, saying how if someone stacks their house with newspapers, we think this person is a hoarder. This person has some, anxiety issue leading to hoarding, and that's crazy, or if they have too much of something else. But having so much money when other people are suffering is not seen as anything wrong. It's actually praised. They're put on the cover of magazines, put on Forbes' most wealthy lists, and we praise them and look at them as the most admirable people. Someone who has so much money, too much money, they can't do anything with it, or they're not going to use almost any of it, or such a small percentage of it, while other people are suffering. We think of that as actually something praiseworthy, and that's someone we admire. I think that's really sick and something very problematic. Imagine if you were in a house, and we can use this analogy, the world is like a home, but we're all spread out a little bit more than one house, but really we are still sharing one living place. If you're in a house and there's sandwiches and there's 10 people and 20 sandwiches, and one guy had 18 of them, and then other people were splitting the other 2 and starving and not doing well, would you praise that person who was hoarding the 18 sandwiches and be like, wow, that's who we all want to be, and other people are suffering and dying around him, but we praise that person? If anything, we would talk about how horrible that is and how selfish that person is being and inhumane they are, that they are, having too much. They can't even use what they have, and other people would actually need it to survive, and they're not getting it. And so it's not just to blame the wealthy and the elite. It's a very easy target to talk about, because it's not just about them. It's about how we as a society deal with these issues and view these issues, that we do look at, well, if you can get more money, you should always get it. So most people, if they're in this position of those wealthy individuals, would probably do the same thing and just think, well, I got to just keep building wealth. It's like this kind of like video game, or like a score that you have to just adding to that number. without really looking at why and what does it do to me? Does it do anything for me? And who is suffering in the world as a result of this? It's just looked at as an acceptable thing, going back to this economic rationality that if you can have more money, you should always be trying to have more money. There is no reason for you not to. You'd be stupid not to do that. And I think that is very, very harmful and something that we all should take a second look at and recognize, what are we doing? Why are we thinking in this way? Why is money, and going back to the question that the listener asked, money and happiness, why are we making it that you always should be trying to get more money? Now, another aspect of this is that so many people suffer from not having enough money that it actually does further perpetuate this type of a mindset that we need to have more money. And if you had money, you would be okay and happy and feel really good, because the research does show that when you don't have enough money to meet your basic needs, that stress that you have, that lack of comfort, lack of stability, will make you unhappy or will contribute to negatively to your overall well-being, which we can understand. If you're constantly having food insecurity or housing instability or insecurity, of course you're going to feel unhappy and stressed and can't enjoy so many aspects of life. So I think because of these things, as many things tend to be, it's a self-fulfilling type of a thing, or it's something that feeds on itself, because those who have think that they should keep having more and more and more, and this also leads to more people being deprived. Those who are deprived genuinely do think having more money will make them happy. Now, it doesn't mean they have to become part of the 1% to feel that happiness, but to have those basic needs met is going to be necessary for them to feel better. And so it does make them think, again, money is the solution. In some ways, we can look at it, money has been the problem by creating these possibilities for accumulations of wealth that really don't make sense, that don't function in a way that is helpful to all of humanity. Talking about injustices, as I also talked about Monday and today, when we look at the world and we have things, for example, medicine that will save a child's life, but that family doesn't have money, or we in the United States don't have universal health care, or there's other issues that get in the way, isn't that crazy to think the medicine exists to save a child's life, but because of this money thing, which we've made the most important thing in the world, that child might die? Does that make sense? How can we justify that? Or even when I see these online fundraising things, of course, on one hand, it shows the goodness of people's hearts that they're sometimes donating money to someone they don't even know to pay for their medical bills or to help them out. That's showing the goodness of humanity. But that problem even exists, to me, I think shows one of the badnesses of humanity, or the ills of humanity, that we can allow for people to not be taken care of when we have the resources to do so. Again, there's charities that help kids, the Ronald McDonald Foundation. I remember volunteering there once. So it's for families whose kids are in the hospital. And so because it can affect them financially, of course, to pay for all the bills, and the parents sometimes need to stay there or want to stay there with their child, of course, when they're going through the treatments and going through these things, and then they're not taken care of. This is just crazy to me that we need people to step in to take care of them, that we as a society aren't already doing that. I think is very mind-boggling, illogical, and inhumane. And we were talking earlier about the injustices and how we look back sometimes, we think, oh, if I was around, I would have done this, or I wish I was around during Hitler's time in Germany to stand up. First of all, it's not clear you would have been someone who stood up, because most people didn't. But so that's its own conversation. It's very easy in hindsight of 80 years to look back and say I would have done something differently. But there's injustices happening around us today that are, I don't want to compare them, but very illogical, inhumane, and unjust, and don't have to be. You don't need to go back 50 years to find injustices to do something about it. They're happening all around us all the time. We have to make sure we look, which means, one, looking for them, not turning an eye, listen to people who are suffering, and also pay more attention or try to shift our mindset and not just accept what has been said to be the realities of the world, that, oh, things have to just be this way. that's how it is in every generation. The injustices that are happening are just somehow justified as somehow right. This is how it's supposed to be, or things can't change. This is how it's going to always be to some degree, and then things do change. So we have to face the discomforts of looking at the world in a way that makes us realize it's not all good, and it's up to us to do something about it. So I know it was just a 3-word question, money and happiness, but wanted to share some thoughts on that. Let's go to our last commercial break. We'll be right back.